Hello and welcome to episode number 21 of the Nintendo Life podcast. Back once again after a 6-month hiatus. I'm of course your host, James Newton, better known as Daddy Newts if you follow me on Twitter. And we're taking a look at some of the upcoming games heading for the Wii and the 3DS in the next sort of 6 to 12 months. I'm very fortunate now to be joined by Mr. Kevin Eva. Hello, Kevin.
Hi, nice to be here.
Nice to be here. Thank you very much for joining us. If you could just introduce yourself and a little bit about what you do, and then we'll get on with the show.
Well, as was said, my name's Kevin Eva. I'm the Square Enix London Studios Community Manager. You may also know me as Archange UK, and from my time at Sega, which was for a little while. And I am principally, at the present moment anyway, the Community Manager in charge of Heroes of Ruin, which is a forthcoming action-adventure.
I got a chance to play Heroes of Ruin a couple of months ago, in July I think it was actually, and I really, really liked it. But if you could just sum up the game for some of our listeners who maybe haven't heard of it, that'd be really good.
Yeah, it's an action-adventure game. It's got some RPG elements to it. People have been comparing it to Diablo and Torchlight and all sorts of things. It's not a pure RPG. It's quite an old-school sort of style game. It does dungeon crawler. You play one of 4 classes. There's the Savage, who's sort of a big, burly character. There's the Architect, who is the female character, and she's a sorceress. The 2 characters we've been really talking about so far are the Vindicator, who's this lion man with a humongous sword and just goes through and smashes things out the way. He's a character who's sort of very, very sort of honor-driven, and then you've got the complete opposite of that character in the Gunslinger, who unsurprisingly uses guns a lot.
Who knew?
I would have thought he'd have used some sort of mind control with a name like that, but no, he uses guns as a ranged character, and he's got a bit of a shady past. As well. In fact, they've all got shady buttons. That's actually one of the things we discussed on the podcast segment I recorded for the official Heroes of Ruin podcast, Ruincast, the other day. Was the name Heroes of Ruin itself? It's the ruin aspect is not so much the world or anything like that. It's quite literally Heroes of Ruin. These guys are not the best heroes in the world to be tasked with the quest that they've been given, which is to save this kingdom, which is a part of this world called Vale. And there's been a very, very long war, sort of dark time, where everyone's been at war, everyone's been poor, famines, all the terrible things that you would associate with a global economic crisis. And the leader of this city, which is Nexus, has mysteriously been poisoned. He was one of the ones who brokered this peace that finally put an end to all this suffering and brought about this sort of golden era of peace. And someone's poisoned him, and no one's quite sure how on earth they're going to actually cure him. However, if they don't cure him, of course, then suspicions will rise. If he dies, fingers will be pointed, and the fragile peace which has been fought so long and so hard to actually get will just crumble if he dies. So it's very important that these guys go out and find this cure. But of course, they've got no idea exactly where to start, and they're all actually kind of out for their own interests and not really for the greater good.
So obviously story is sort of a big focus, and you mentioned you've got different classes. Do they have individual stories within that, or do they all follow sort of like the same story path?
Well, I should say that anytime you play Heroes of Ruin, you'll actually have a different experience. The dungeons are sort of completely randomly generated. Obviously, there's a couple of key points here and there, but the path you get every single time will be different. If you go into somebody else's game and go, oh yes, I've completed this level, that's all well and good, but you'll actually find that the path that they take is completely different to the one that you may have taken, and what you come across would be very different. The characters themselves do have different pathways and different backgrounds. The Vindicator character, the Lion Swordsman, he is part of a sort of very noble warrior class, sort of very solemn guardians of the land, sort of career soldiers, and he has done something that's actually got him cast out of the group. Your particular one, although it's not exactly said what it is, but it's pretty severe for a Vindicator to get thrown out of what is essentially his order. So he's searching the land for some way to get his honor back, and he thinks that finding this cure would be a pretty good thing. The Gunslinger, as I said, he's a bit of a shady character, or at least was, because he was a thief, he was a gambler, he was all manner of things, and he owes people a lot of money, and they are calling to collect, so he needs cash in a hurry, otherwise they're going to break his trigger fingers. So they're coming in from different angles, and the reasons of why they are coming in is very different. But like I said, the actual gameplay you play, the way you go through the levels will be different for every person, regardless of whether or not you play the same class or not.
You mentioned as well earlier that if you go into other players' games, I mean, what sort of multiplayer options are we talking about there? Is it
when we get to the game going live, there's not really going to be such a thing as single and multiplayer. What we're doing is it's going to be drop in, drop out, and it's going to be completely seamless. So you can choose whether or not you have slots open in your party of 4. And you can specify if one will be for a private slot for somebody who's on your friends list, for instance. But otherwise, you can literally go in and out of people's games, and it'll be seamless. If you want to, play it single player on your own, that's fine. You can go that way. But every game, it'll be a case of, well, you may come across people in your travels, i.e. people who've joined your game, and you can go together as a group, and you'll be able to talk on using the microphone built into your 3DS, and have sort of live chat and organise your battles.
That sounds good. You were saying about friends lists. Is it possible to invite players on your friends list? Because that's something that we haven't really seen so far.
Well, if you're setting slots for your private use for specific friends, then yeah.
That's good.
So it'll all be there, but you'll be sort of playing with people from around the world. It's not local, wireless connection. It is full
online.
It's full online.
Microphone.
Full online. Microphone, chat, seamless drop in and out. The other thing that we're doing actually is obviously using as much as the 3DS's USPs as possible, and we're using both Street Pass and Spot Pass. So if you go, if your 3DS is in sleep mode and you're walking around and somebody you pass has a Heroes of Ruin save file, everything you actually have sold in the game. So we've been very clear about trying to streamline things. Streamline as much of the game as possible, because there's a tendency within a game like this where you're picking up loot every so often that there's, you're going to end up with a bag, a pack of holding, which is rather full in a hurry, and you're going to be stopping the game and going through your inventory and trying to find the best thing in a hurry, and getting rid of the other stuff. What we've actually implemented in the game is if you come across a piece of loot, there's some options for you. You can either put it, You can put it into your pack, and you can carry that around and when you go back to Nexus, you can go to one of the shops and then sell that, and you'll get that for amount of gold, which you can obviously then put towards other things. But you can also auto-equip it if it's a better piece of equipment. There'll be a little symbol at the top of your screen which will tell you that this is better than what you've got at the moment. So you can auto-equip it. It'll appear on your character model within the game. You'll see it. However, if you press down on the D-pad, you will automatically sell that. You won't get as much gold back as you would for, say, if you'd have actually carried it around, if you carried it back into town and then sold it then. But you can, boom, auto-sell it, get the gold now, take the slight hit for not travelling back with it, but get gold straight away.
Sounds good. And then you mentioned Street Pass as well, so that feeds into the Street Pass shop somehow?
We'll say everything you sell when you go past somebody, every item that you sold, the game will keep track of. And because obviously there's 80,000 items in the game. Now that doesn't mean 80,000 weapons, and obviously you've got to remember it's sort of like split across floor classes as well. But so there's boots and rings and armor and shoulder pads and helmets and weapons. So there's 8,000 stuff. All the important stuff that you need to go out. You need to have to go out shopping on a Saturday night. All of those things will be there. You will not get them all in a playthrough. So anything that you've sold will then appear within the stores of those people that you actually pass.
Which is cool. Which is, like I say, a good way to sort of streamline it, because a lot of people, when you're walking around, obviously the principle of Street Pass is you just carry 3DS with you as a routine. You don't always necessarily want to get it out and sort of say, excuse me, does anyone here want to play Heroes of Ruin? Has anyone got this, +5 Decimator Mace? Because I would like one. So that sounds quite good. But obviously, I believe the game is going to use Spot Pass as well. What can you tell us about that?
This is where Heroes of Ruin gets quite exciting, at least from my point of view. Using Spot Pass, you will get for the year at least a year after the game is released in early 2012, via Spot Pass, you will get a new challenge every day. So it could be anything, but you'll get a new challenge. There's scope for doing some new content as well, maybe, but we'll have to see how that goes. But there'll be a daily challenge every day for a year, and there will be weekly challenges as well, and those will get you, rare bits of loot, some extra money, some extra experience points that can obviously go in to your character, and that'll be sort of just something else to do. But say every day for free. You can't
free, yeah. You can't complain about that, can you? So it's free online multiplayer.
It'd be terribly unreasonable of you.
Yes, yeah, it would just be ungrateful, wouldn't it, really?
Well, I wouldn't say.
So free online multiplayer and free additional content for a year certainly sounds like something else, something different than what we've seen on 3DS so far.
Trying to tie in as many things as possible. So we're trying to tie in that. And there's we're doing stuff on the website at the moment, heroesofruin.com, where we've got something called the Wall of Champions, which is an XP, which is an XP related sort of task, where when you do things on the site, you gain experience points, which will gain you levels. And those people who are currently doing it, though there's only one level at the moment, but if you get that level, there's going to be sort of special treats and in store for you, sort of a special title on the website and all sorts of things. But we're going to try and tie that in with the experience in the game. So if you do various numbers of challenges in the game, then that will unlock more XP within the website, and that will sort of raise your rank and level.
Sounds good. So that's heroesofruin.com, is that right?
Heroesofruin.com. And whilst that extended Wall of Champions, which whenever it is that episode 4 of Ruincast gets finally recorded and put online, which will hopefully be this week coming from the time of recording of this podcast, you'll be able to find out just all the details on that, because I'm going to divulge all But I will reveal one little thing in that because I've been writing the XP rewards as to what they are and having tremendous fun and getting just every piece of pop culture nonsense I can in the titles and all sorts of other video games as well. I mean, there's other video games on there already. For example, the very first one, when you sign up for a new account on Heroes of Ruin, the achievement is Rolling Start.
Nice.
But that wasn't done by me. That was done by my predecessor as well.
Knowing you as I do, that's very surprising.
Yeah, well, it wasn't me, but there's going to be some other ones in there as well. But I will reveal something that I wrote down the other day, and I thought, who can I put in there as a little bonus? And I thought, I know a website that's got a very nice name that could potentially go down as a website, XP achievement that's of significance. The term Nintendo Life
I recognise that name.
Is a very good term. I've heard it somewhere before.
Yeah, I think so.
But
So our listeners should tune into episode 4 of the Ruincast via heroesofruin.com.
Well, I'm not going to tell you what it is in that, but I will.
But they won't want to miss it.
But don't miss out on that. But there will be an XP achievement called Nintendo Life in honour of NintendoLife.com.
What more could you ask for? So obviously we've got heroesofruin.com, but how else can our listeners keep up to date with the Heroes of Ruin updates?
Well, like I mentioned, there's the Ruincast, which is the official Heroes of Ruin podcast. It's not on iTunes yet because iTunes is incapable of actually approving any podcasts, yes. As I'm sure you know.
Yeah, well, we're on there.
You're in there now. Oh, I've been trying for months.
Yeah, it's been a long and steady road, but we got there.
Oh, anyway, but there's that. There's a Heroes of Ruin official Facebook page, which is Facebook.com, not Facebook.com.
Not Facebook, that's after a few drinks.
Oh, that's Facebook.com.
Sean Connery's own
That's
account.
Sean Connery book. Yes, Heroes of Ruin. Facebook.com/Heroes of Ruin, and you can find out all details on there. There is a Twitter account, which is for the Square Enix London Studios, which is part of Square Enix Europe. And that is twitter.com/Morsels. But so MORESELS, more cells.
It's a clever play on words, isn't it? Because of course
it's
more
probably
from
the
Square
only. It's probably the only pun we could have done. But yes, you can follow us on there, and we'll let you know everything that's going on. There's also forums, obviously, on the heroesofruin.com homepage where you can chat to fellow people. Sounds good. So we've not got an official release date, have we, for Heroes of Ruin yet? But we're expecting it. Early 2012 is the official time, as I am aware of at this moment in time. That sounds good. So it's not too long to wait, really. We've got 4 to 6 months, something like that, probably. I would say so from this point in time. Yeah. Yeah, sounds good. Right, well, Kevin, thank you very much for joining us. Pleasure. And we'll be sure to keep our listeners up to date with everything that goes on in the world of Heroes of Ruin. Thanks again. I'm sure we can get Nintendo Live down for an extra special preview and maybe talking of M-Space and the like. Brilliant stuff. Kevin, thanks again for joining us.
Hello, it's me, Mario. Woohoo! And you're listening to Nintendo Live #1. Woohoo!
Hi everybody, this is Brad, aka Chunky Droid, and I just wanted to say hi to you all and tell you guys how much I'm looking forward to the Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword coming out in November. I had a chance to play the game at a public Nintendo event held in Sydney last weekend, and I have to say that I've never experienced such an immersive game in my life. Just the way that Nunchuck acts as a shield with the Wiimote as your sword, I truly felt I was a part of the action. The difficulty doesn't disappoint either. I had my butt handed to me by the boss in the demo that we got to play, and I can't wait to get back into it and figure out how to beat it. Definitely one to look out for, kids. I'm now very fortunate to be joined by our European reviewer, Peter Willington. Peter, thank you very much for joining me on the show today.
That's my pleasure.
Some of you may know Peter better by his Twitter name, which is 000, but where the Z is an X. Peter, why is this?
Because I want to make my life as difficult as possible for people to find me, because it works so well over the medium of audio, doesn't it? 0. That's Yeah, there's somebody with a completely different Twitter handle who's getting a lot of followers, I think.
Yeah, I should think so, and say, hey, I really enjoyed what you wrote about 101 in explosive megamix.
Oh, yeah.
Can we be friends, please?
Yeah.
But I mean, we're in October now. I don't know where this year has gone. We've had a really, really good year in Nintendo overall. Obviously, we've seen the 3DS launch, and we've had some cracking games to play. But we've only got 2 months left of 2011, and in those 2 months, we've got arguably some of the biggest games in Nintendo's history. But what are some of the games that you're looking forward to playing later this year?
Oh my goodness me! I've got to say that I'm really kind of excited to see Super Mario 3D Land. I'm excited to see what happens with that, because from everything I've kind of seen and everything that I've experienced of the title, seeing it at expos and going hands-on with it at press events, that sort of thing, it's been a game it's been the first Mario game to really surprise me, but surprise me in a kind of slightly bad way, in that I haven't seen much from what they've shown. I haven't seen much experimentation with the title, and I think that it's simply because it's kind of they've kind of put out slightly odd demos or very easy demos for people to try out. But I'm kind of excited to play the whole game itself. I really want to be able to see later improvements, last level kind of moments where the house that. Where R&D1 are kind of able to get on it and bring all of these hopefully weird 3D mechanics into play, because I haven't seen too much of that at the moment.
See, now there's obviously I don't know how much of you've played of the game, but I went to London a couple of weeks ago and I played through the first 2 worlds. I was actually supposed to stop at World 2-3. But I managed to sneak away into a dark corner. I managed to get to the airship at the end of World 2. So I pretty much played like the first 2 worlds, which is the first sort of quarter of the game. And I totally get what you're saying, that you're not seeing a lot of experimentation. I mean, for me, I went in. For me, the benchmark is still Super Mario Galaxy. Mm-hmm. For me, that is just like the absolute pinnacle of sort of Nintendo design brilliance. It really is. But what's so clever about that is, it will introduce a mechanic in, one of the earlier levels, and then later on it puts a different spin on it. And that's where Nintendo keeps going. And you're quite right that from the first 2 worlds, we haven't really seen any of that. Okay, so it's introducing platforming. Tanuki Suit is back, and you've got, sort of classic sort of stages and setups reimagined. But we haven't really seen where Nintendo's gone, okay, here's what you thought this game was about, but now have you considered this? One of the levels which I have seen, which is really clever, and one they featured in some of the trailers, if you find these green warp pipes in certain levels, they'll take you to basically an optical illusion, where if you have the 3D slider switched to off, it looks like all the blocks are all lined up together, or it sort of certainly appears one way in 2D. But when you flick the 3D on, you can tell that actually they have depth. There might be a block nearer to you, or sort of two in the past, in the background. So you may think it appears one way, but then if you flick the switch, you can see it from a different perspective. And that's really what we expected, certainly what I expected, more or less the whole game to be like. I thought it would just completely, challenge you at every opportunity. And to be honest with you, it's not doing that. It's our other podcast editor, John Walger, made a really good point in saying that Super Mario 64 and Mario Galaxy take Mario in one path for 3D. But he sort of likened it to Metroid, in that when they took Metroid 3D, they went down the Metroid Prime route, but they could easily have gone down Other M instead. And it's sort of two offshoots really of this idea of how to take Mario 3D. And that's, I think, what we're seeing with 3D Land. It is Mario World, Mario Brothers, Mario Land, but with 3D exploration sort of built in. It's not, really seeing what you can do with 3D. It's taking an old idea and expressing it in a new way. That's certainly the way that I've approached it.
And I think that that's what Nintendo does best with their Mario games, because when you look at the kind of history of the franchise itself, like, there are lots of very similar mechanics that all borrow from Super Mario Brothers, the first game, but the exciting thing for me has always been how Miyamoto, how R&D1 have kind of taken on those old ideas and given them new life, and with new technologies given them a fresh spin. And you're quite right in that it's not fantastic that, you know, the earlier levels that they've been showing at public events and that sort of thing haven't really focused on this. They've kind of been focusing on, well, this is the old Mario that you love, yay, and that's fine to an extent. But to somebody like myself, yeah, I want to see this new technology used within the Mario oeuvre. You know, I want to that sliding the 3D scale up thing that you were talking about. That sounds absolutely fantastic, and that sounds like more like what they should have been showing, because that fascinates me. So am I right in thinking, because I've seen a few different screenshots, so I'm kind of thinking that this is, so obviously you kind of go down this warp pipe and then you're in these small areas. Now, are these areas kind of like the ones that you might have seen in the original Super Mario Brothers, for example, you know, with lots of little coins and that sort of thing?
Basically. So so if they're sort of, they're diversions, they're not usually alternate routes. Right. You'll drop down and you're presented. So like the one that I played, it basically, if you have 2D, it looks like a pyramid. And it just looks like all the blocks are lined up next to each other. You turn your 3D on and actually can see there's a block to the left that's much nearer the camera. So if you go down it in 2D, you think you're going to step on this block if you go down. If you imagine it like Cubert, there's a game you know that you understand. You'll imagine that all the blocks are, you know, connected, but actually the 3D lets you see that they're not. And the demo that I played, was the first 2 levels from the Japanese game. It actually starts with sort of like an Escher-like puzzle where it certainly appears that there's an impossible shape when you have it in 2D, but when you flick it into 3D, you can see that the sort of the vertical column is much nearer, and it gives you that sense of depth. What we haven't seen so far is how that's going to apply to gaming. But I mean, really, what you and I are both getting at is the best part of this is this means that Nintendo has still got lots of things in store to surprise us with. The fact that we haven't seen this yet doesn't necessarily mean that it's not in there. It just means that, okay, Nintendo's waiting to show it later. It's waiting to show how it can, change everything with a 3D display. But one of the things that I certainly came away from the first 2 worlds is that this game has got so much riding on it. But in actuality, you know, it's probably going to be a really good Mario platformer, but is it going to be a total game changer? Well, for me personally, at this stage in the 3DS's life, I don't think it is. I don't think we should expect a completely, you know, balls out, innovative Mario game 6 months in. I think I said in the preview, this to me is the first step. This is one idea of how Mario can work in 3D. This isn't necessarily, you know, a final effort. To me, imagine it maybe as a draft. You know, it's Nintendo saying, okay, we've got this console, we've got this character, let's try this out. But we all know that Nintendo, like you say, loves to refine, it loves to reimagine, and who's to say that in 2 years' time we won't be seeing something completely different? I mean, really, when you got Wii, the first Mario game on Wii, I think, was Super Paper Mario, and you're like, okay, this is quite good, but it's not a definitive Mario. You knew there was going to be more. And then, you know, a year or so later, they came out with Super Mario Galaxy and were like, this is it. This is, you know, what we were waiting for. And honestly, I think that's going to be the same thing with Super Mario 3D Land. I think it's certainly got a lot riding on it. A lot, like, you know, media and sort of consumers have got it in their mindset that if this game doesn't sell, you know, 5 million copies, 3DS is dead. Well, that's not necessarily the case, you know. It's a Mario game. It's coming out at Christmas, and it is going to do well. But let's not sort of trick ourselves into thinking that it is going to be, you know, the definitive Mario experience. It's going to be a really good game, certainly, but it's the first Mario game on 3DS. It is not, you know, anywhere near what we're going to see in the coming years, because they're going to do more.
Exactly, yeah. I mean, now, it's very interesting that you raised that you know, that there's some ideas here, and that maybe this isn't going to be the definitive one, but there's going to be some ideas here and some experimentation, that kind of thing. Do you think that they chose to use the word land Do you think that was a very deliberate choice by Nintendo? Because
yeah, certainly. I mean, semantically speaking, obviously they've been getting bigger each time. They've had Land, they've had World, they went to Galaxy, and now I think the choice of going back to Land, I think does ground it somewhat. I mean, they've obviously re-released Super Mario Land and Mario Land 2 on Virtual Console, and they want to bring it back to that. I mean, to me, it's interesting they went with Land, not World, because Super Mario World certainly brings up, much more favourable and much more recognised connotations than Mario Land, for example.
Yeah, but the point I'm trying to get at is the Land games have always been places where there's been experimentation, and they've taken some of those learnings from Land, from the portable versions, and put them into the sort of main home console series. Now, as a sort of example, we see Super Mario Land on Game Boy is a very, very different game from the sort of mainline Super Mario Brothers titles. It's the second Game Boy Super Mario Land again tried some very, very different things, had a very odd aesthetic to it. Mario Land 3 was of course Wario Land, and again, the perspective, there's a perspective shift there. The mechanics are very, very different. I'm wondering whether or not they've placed Land on this 3DS release to kind of put some sort of subconscious seed into the audience of, into the sort of hardcore Nintendo audience. Sort of say, well, this is potentially a very, very different title, and we are only experimenting at the moment, and maybe this isn't what we really envisage a portable Mario to be. I mean, do you think there's any relevance in that, or am I
think certainly. I mean, obviously after they did the Land series and they moved on to World, they've obviously only done 2, but I mean, they couldn't be more different. Super Mario World and Yoshi's Island,
sure.
I mean, are 2 completely different games. I do think as well that with re-releasing the original Lands, they are sort of preparing the player and saying, look, actually, if you go back and play these now, I mean, like you say, Super Mario Land 2 is pretty weird. You go inside a giant Mario at some point, and I mean, that's before Starship Mario and all that sort of stuff happened. But I mean, they are brilliant games, as you quite rightly say. Also, Wario Land, a superb game, but completely different. It really is. I think what they're doing, and I mean, I can imagine some of our listeners now sort of saying, how dare you say that this isn't Nintendo's best effort at a Mario game. I'm certainly not saying that Nintendo isn't trying. Nintendo knows how much is riding on this game, and it will, as always, do its best to present a really good Mario game. I'm just sort of saying that it's one image of a Mario game. It is gonna hark back to the portables, the Land games of previous. Like you say, Mario Land and Mario Brothers couldn't really be much more different in terms of alternate exits. And I mean, Mario Land 2's even got checkpoints in it and things like that, and bonus stages and all sorts of weird stuff. I think they do want to clearly mark, this is trying. This is not, by any stretch of the imagination, new Super Mario Brothers, which was a game title which could not have been more direct in its sort of efficiency. That game just said, "This is the Super Mario Brothers," except, hey, look, it's new. I do think it's going to be a fascinating game, and I do genuinely think it will divide players in a way that perhaps Mario games haven't for a long time.
I think that's a great thing, isn't it?
Like, definitely, yeah, of course.
Because I think the one thing that. And I'd never go so far as to say that the Mario games are stale in any way, because there's no matter which game you go to, there's a great deal of joy and life to Mario platformers. But coming off of the end of Galaxy 2, it struck me that I couldn't quite fathom where Nintendo were going to take their mascot next. And for me, like, the most exciting thing that Nintendo ever do is when they take their core franchises and they go in such an odd direction. It's why I think that the Kirby games, for example, are some of the best games that Nintendo put out, because not a single Kirby game is similar to any other. They're constantly doing new things, and I think that actually that's why this release is actually quite exciting, because we're going to see Nintendo try some new things. They are, they're working in in a completely new dimension, and this is the first time that this character really is going to be in this dimension, that isn't just a strange Mario Brothers hybrid on Virtual Boy. It's this is the game that they kind of have to go, this is Mario, he's in 3D, this totally works. Audience, developers, naysayers, get on board because this is what Mario is on this platform.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it's interesting that you say it's got to stand as a beacon, really. I mean, I keep saying there's a lot of pressure riding on this game, and I think the idea is if Nintendo cannot prove that Mario works on 3DS, how in God's name is anyone else going to prove that their franchises are going to work? Yeah. A Mario 3D platform on 3DS, to be honest with you, we shouldn't even really need to talk about it for this long. We should just go, yeah, it's going to be Mario, it's going to be great, let's move on, shall we? But the fact is, like I say, I really do think it's going to divide people. It's not going to, I'll lay my hat out now, it's not going to emulate even closely the review scores of Mario Galaxy 2. I think that sort of as a meta score, we're probably looking at 90, 92. People will say, how, that's terrible, Mario Galaxy 2 is getting 97 or whatever. But I think it's going to be a polarising game. I think it's going to be a very enjoyable game. And nobody who's written about this game so far has said anything other than it's enjoyable.
Unfortunately, we lost Peter at this point due to technical difficulties, but he will be returning in a future episode of the Nintendo Live podcast. That just about wraps things up for this month's episode. We hope you've enjoyed listening. As always, don't forget to subscribe to the podcast, nintendolife.com/feeds/podcast. All the links are in the news post accompanying this. If you want to follow us on Twitter, it's just twitter.com/nintendolife, facebook.com/nintendolife. Follow me personally, I am Daddy Newts on Twitter, or pretty much anywhere else that allows social networking to happen. Until the next episode of the podcast, I will leave you with John's superb chip and game music podcast, NLFM. If you haven't checked out his Halloween episode yet, do so. It is superb. Once again, happy gaming!